Chapter 1, Second Survivor, Who? Uchiha Shinji's eyes snapped open. He drew a breath that tasted of stale air. Where am I? Terror flooded him the instant the thought formed. He couldn't move. Apart from forced, shallow breaths, his body was like a corpse. No twitch, no response. A flat, disembodied voice sounded in his ear. Return mission, Akatsuki. Complete the return mission to return. The words only deepened his confusion. Return mission? Akatsuki? What did any of that mean? Footsteps approached. Quick, save him. Shinji wanted to call back, to shout for help, but no sound came. His eyes were covered by cloth. Indeed, his whole head and body had been wrapped in a white shroud, the kind that completely conceals a corpse. A soft sound of surprise, then a hand peeled the cloth away. Relief flooded Shinji for a second, until the figure leaning over him made his blood run cold. Silver hair, a black mask. Kakashi. He couldn't be mistaken. The person lifting the shroud was Kakashi Hatake. Medical team, there's another survivor, Kakashi called. Footsteps hammered closer. Several medical ninjas swarmed around Shinji, helping him sit and examining him hurriedly. How is this possible? He was definitely without vital signs, one muttered. Maybe suspended animation, another suggested. This is rare. They whispered urgently as they checked his pulse and joints. As Shinji slumped upright, his field of vision widened. He found himself in a vast morgue. Rows of cots stretched away in neat lines. Every cot held a body covered with white. Medical ninja moved busily between them. Nearby, glass jars with preserved eyes sat by a table, a gruesome clinical sight. His body still felt numb and disconnected. Terror churned inside him, but his face remained blank. His gaze was clouded and distant. Kakashi, dressed in Anbu attire, watched him with folded arms. How is he? He asked the medic nearest. Vitals are stabilizing, but his mental state. The medic shook his head and let the sentence trail off. Kakashi looked at Shinji with something like pity and ordered, "Take him to the hospital for treatment. I'll report to the Hokage." Hospital. On the narrow hospital bed, Shinji's face remained vacant, but he could feel himself slowly returning to the world, a trembling in his fingertips, a warmth in his limbs. A rush of fractured images spilled through his mind, brief flashes that made his heart slam. Uchiha Shinji. Compiling those fragments with the morgue scene, he began to understand. He hadn't merely woken up in some strange place. His consciousness had slipped into the body of an 8-year-old named Uchiha Shinji. The time was the night of the Uchiha clan massacre. The real Shinji had been killed, sliced down by Itachi Uchiha. How had he, after sleeping in his original life, been transported into the ninja world, into a body that had just been declared dead? And what was that voice he'd heard? Return mission? Akatsuki? A jagged memory stabbed through him. The instant Itachi's blade swung. The image was warped by fear. Everything blurred and twisted except one thing, Itachi's cold, crimson Sharingan. Shinji felt as if he had been physically pierced by that stare. Cold sweat broke out along his back. The shock of reliving someone else's final emotions hit him hard. His vision blurred, and then his own eyes changed. Ink-black irises flushed crimson. Tomoe appeared, 1, 2, 3, forming the 3 Tomoe Sharingan. But the change didn't stop. The Tomoe spun and multiplied into interwoven dark rings, 3 concentric loops forming a peculiar pin-like pattern. The pattern dissolved as quickly as it had come. The crimson faded, and his irises returned to black. For an instant, it had been so vivid it felt more real than any dream. Mangekyo Sharingan. Even in the briefness of the flash, Shinji understood. He had somehow awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, the legendary form the Uchiha clan whispered about. The trigger had been the extreme emotions in the final moments of Shinji's original life. He'd barely reached the 3 Tomoe state before death. Then, with his soul displaced into this new consciousness, the Sharingan completed its awakening in relay. The original Shinji's death and his own new existence together produced the final surge. He felt something like stunned awe. Intense emotion, grief, rage, love, could force an Uchiha's eyes to evolve. For someone to push so far in an instant before dying was rare. The last time such a deep change had been mentioned was in stories of Uchiha Obito, who shaped the 4th Shinobi World War. Even Sasuke, who was driven by his brother Itachi's torment, initially awakened only a 1 Tomoe Sharingan after witnessing his parents' deaths. That a seemingly undistinguished Uchiha like Shinji could touch the Mangekyo filled him with disbelief and a strange, tremulous hope. A slow, bittersweet thought eased in. From now on, he would be living as Uchiha Shinji, carrying the boy's body, his past, his fate. The realization left him unexpectedly wistful. Then the same emotionless voice returned in his ear, as flat and clinical as before. The plane is under invasion. Countdown, 9. The words reverberated through him. Confused, shaken, and with a newly awakened power in his eyes, Uchiha Shinji lay back against the pillow and tried to piece together what came next. Chapter 2. Countdown, Invasion. Uchiha Shinji, formerly Lin Gen, stared at the ceiling, utterly bewildered. Wrapped in bandages and too weak to sit up, he had just been told by a disembodied voice in his head that his plane had been invaded. The voice had even started a countdown. When nothing else happened, he called out inwardly, desperate, "Hey, what invasion? Explain it." Silence answered him. For a while he wondered if the whole thing had been a hallucination. He felt helpless as well as frustrated. Even moving was a chore. The next few days passed in a fog, mostly because he was badly hurt. The slash Itachi had left across his chest had cut deep enough to damage his lungs. Even with medical ninjutsu, recovery would be slow. Worse, that mysterious voice kept ringing in his ears every day with the descending numbers of a countdown. That convinced him it wasn't imaginary. Whatever it was real. Knowing that only made him more anxious. As the days went on, the full impact of the Uchiha annihilation sank in. Everyone in Konoha treated him with pity. Most villagers had never harbored outright hatred for the Uchiha, so much as resentment of their arrogance and fear of the Sharingan. With the clan gone, the petty clashes vanished. In their place were sighs and sympathy. After all, the Uchiha had bled for Konoha in the Great Wars. Shinji accepted treatment and tried to adapt. At first he was afraid his status as a transmigrator would be exposed, afraid someone would cut the grass at the root and finish off the last Uchiha remnant. But for now, things were quiet, and in the hospital, everyone displayed nothing but concern. Bang! He collapsed onto the floor. A nurse rushed over and helped him up, scolding softly, "You're pushing yourself too hard. Rest a few more days before trying this again." Grimacing through the pain, Shinji replied, "The doctor said my wounds are mostly healed. I can move my body." The nurse hesitated. "But I can do it." He refused her help. Taking a breath, he forced himself to stand and took one shaky step. Each movement was agony, but he grit his teeth and kept going. Whether it was the eerie countdown or the fact he was one of the only Uchiha survivors of the massacre, he felt he had no right to rest. He fell, got up, fell again, kept getting up. By the end of an afternoon of this brutal training, he could walk, painfully but without assistance. The nurse watched, astonished. "Incredible," she said flatly. "I need to go to the bathroom," he told her. "I'll help." "No." He shook his head and went alone. Once sure the restroom was empty, he slipped into a stall, shut the door, sat down, and lowered his hand over his face. Mangekyo Sharingan. Activate, he thought. Instantly his eyes changed. Crimson flared. The inky rings bloomed. The world sharpened to an almost painful clarity. He could make out every line on his hand that covered his eyes. So this was the Mangekyo Sharingan. He felt a mix of shock and relief. For days, he'd kept the ability suppressed to avoid drawing attention. Finally, he could confirm it. On the way back to his ward, he saw another surviving Uchiha, Sasuke, but the boy lay in a coma, trapped under Itachi's Tsukuyomi. It didn't look like he would wake anytime soon. Shinji continued forcing his recovery. At first, he could barely walk. Steadily, with stubborn practice and medical ninjutsu, he learned to jog and even leap a little. The countdown voice kept echoing every day, making the hospital routine feel somehow urgent and incomplete. He still had no idea what invasion meant, but preparing as much as possible couldn't hurt. A week after admission, the doctor inspected him and beamed. "Your recovery is much faster than we expected." "Thank you," Shinji said. The doctor waved it off. "Our treatments helped seal the wounds, but this speed, you've trained hard these past days." Shinji flexed his hand and felt his strength. His work had paid off. With medical care, he was essentially healed. After a few instructions, the doctor left. Mizuki stepped in soon after, his former Ninja Academy teacher, smiling with the same polite warmth Shinji had learned to distrust. Mizuki glanced him over and said, "Your injuries are healed enough. You can be discharged today." After the paperwork, Mizuki led him to an apartment building, unlocked a third-floor unit, and handed him the key. This will be your new home. He also gave Shinji a bank book and a few practical tips before leaving. Shinji closed the door carefully and inspected the bank book. The village compensation, over 7 million. That was substantial. The apartment was modest, but centrally located, a short walk from the ninja school in a busy neighborhood. With the Uchiha estate now unguarded, it made sense the village would place him somewhere the clan's possessions couldn't be easily kept by two injured children, himself and the unconscious Sasuke. The money probably included compensation for confiscating the clan lands, but thinking back to the morgue, to the centuries of Uchiha wealth and the Sharingan embedded in all those bodies, he realized 7 million was a small sum compared to what Konoha now controlled. At night, lanterns and neon warmed the village streets. Shinji sat on his bed and stared out at Konoha, half listening to the muffled sounds from the neighboring apartment. He felt paranoid. Was someone watching him from next door? Then he dismissed the thought. If someone were watching, they wouldn't be so careless as to make noise. He still wondered who lived there, though. Lying back, he tried to make sense of everything. Why had he transmigrated? What did the return mission mentioned by the voice mean? He'd tried every trick he could to call the voice, to force communication. Nothing. He set one priority. No matter what, he would survive. Between his mangekyou and the village's lingering respect for the Uchiha name, he had some levers to pull, for now. There were still people who might want him dead or someone else's gains. Danzo, who had orchestrated the purge, Orochimaru, who coveted the Sharingan, Itachi, who had once hunted him, Obito and others involved in the massacre, plus outside villages and organizations interested in the Uchiha's bloodline limit. The list was long enough to warrant caution. Lie low, he told himself. Staying in Konoha, safely under the third Hokage's authority and the village's ideals, was probably less dangerous than wandering. He wasn't Sasuke, who might enjoy some protection under Itachi's shadow. If he acted rashly, Danzo would be ready to crush a surviving Uchiha remnant. He had just settled on that plan when the voice returned, clear as a bell in his mind. The plane is under invasion. A single wordless chime followed, then a number, 2. Shinji's face went pale. He remembered the voice had started at 9 a week ago, 1 per day. 2 meant there were only 2 days left. Chapter 3. People who shouldn't be there. Shinji woke, washed, and arrived at the Ninja Academy early. When he stepped into the classroom, he froze. The room was full of students he didn't recognize, but among the few familiar faces were 2 who had no business being here. Heart-pounding, he used the original owner's fragmented memories to find his seat. All around him, sympathetic and curious looks landed on his face. Everyone knew what had happened to the Uchiha. Konoha's most prestigious clan had been wiped out overnight by their own young clan head, and only 2 children had survived. The whole village had been shaken. Shinji had grown used to those gazes by now and said nothing. He merely glanced at the red-haired girl in the first row by the podium and the black-haired boy sitting in front of him. Both should not have been here. The thin, red-haired girl looked exactly like Karin, who possessed the Whirlpool clan's bloodline limit. The black-haired boy could have been Haku from the Hidden Mist. How were they both at the Konoha Ninja Academy? Shinji searched the original owner's memories for explanations, but found nothing. The original owner had apparently never noticed Karin or Haku as classmates. He turned his head to the other end of the classroom and spotted the boy with the pale, featureless eyes, Hyuga Neji, the only person the original owner had ever cared about in those memories, the rival he'd constantly mentioned. Morning classes passed in a blur. As a proud Uchiha, the original owner had a cool distance from classmates. Shinji's expression of aloofness only reinforced that. No one spoke to him the entire morning, and he welcomed the quiet. He did not want attention. Above all, he was afraid of being exposed. A voice interrupted his thoughts. The boy in front of him, who had offered the lunchbox, smiled expectantly. "You forgot your bento, didn't you? If you don't mind, eat with me." Shinji blinked. He had indeed forgotten to bring lunch. Embarrassed, he asked, "Your name is?" The boy introduced himself without surprise. "My name is Haku." Shinji's chest tightened. Haku's presence at Konoha still felt impossible. The academy's curriculum was straightforward: wilderness survival, tracking, identifying medicinal herbs and the basic theory of chakra extraction. Practical instruction in ninjutsu and genjutsu hadn't begun yet. Taijutsu was taught mostly through sparring and tool-throwing practice. After lunch, the students went out to the playground, some chasing and playing, others paired off to spar. Shinji spotted more familiar faces: Naruto, Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, though Naruto was a grade below, and their paths rarely crossed. On his side of the field, Neji kept to himself, quietly practicing the Hyuga gentle fist against a wooden stake in the corner. He looked no more than 8, yet each strike and movement was precise and fierce. Watching him, Shinji grew solemn. In the original owner's memories, Neji had been the superior in taijutsu. The owner had been soundly beaten a number of times. Shinji, who had no experience in this world, felt even less prepared. Children here weren't like children at home. 7- and 8-year-olds moved with a martial artist's fluidity. Offense and defense blending so naturally, strikes landed with power. He had imagined that with a pair of Mangekyo Sharingan he could look down on the other students, but without solid fundamentals he couldn't even handle the average kids his own age. And the Mangekyo Sharingan was not a tool to be wasted. Its use consumed something, and its power had to be preserved. A harsher realization settled in. Without relying on the Sharingan, his raw strength fell far short of the original owners. The original Uchiha had ranked nearly at the top of their grade, second only to Neji. Shinji guessed his current level was closer to the bottom. If he didn't close that gap quickly, the discrepancy might attract dangerous attention. He mulled over the problem when Haku returned, hopeful. "Shinji, can we practice taijutsu together?" Shinji inwardly panicked at the thought of sparring, but kept his face neutral. "You're too weak," he said, shaking his head. Haku's eyes widened in apology. "I'm sorry, I was presumptuous." There was sincerity in that apology. Despite the anomaly of Haku and Karin being enrolled at Konoha's academy, Shinji couldn't deny Haku's gentle, easygoing nature. It made him feel slightly guilty. Evening came and the academy dismissed. Shinji walked toward his apartment, turning over the day in his mind. He found Haku walking the same way and learned, much to his surprise, that they lived next door to each other. "You live next door?" Haku asked. Shinji nodded. "Shinji, take care of me." "You too," Haku said. Back in his room, Shinji collapsed on the bed and let his thoughts drift. Haku and Karin at Konoha, was this a butterfly effect or a parallel world bleeding into his own? He pushed the questions aside and rubbed his chest. The deep, bone-deep knife wound that had marked the original owner's death had been healed by medical ninjutsu, but the memory of dying flashed through him from time to time, still cold and unpleasant. Then a voice seemed to come from nowhere, or perhaps from somewhere inside him. Plane invaded. Countdown. 1. Please be prepared. An invasion will occur after midnight tonight. Shinji sat bolt upright and checked the clock on the wall. It read 8:05 p.m., less than 4 hours until midnight. Chapter 4. Heaven? Standing at the window and looking out over Konoha under the night sky, Shinji replayed the village's layout in his mind. He had spent the last few days running through invasion scenarios and countermeasures. He had memorized Konoha, could point out the Hokage building, the Anbu headquarters, the hospital with his eyes closed. If an invasion happened, he wanted to be able to move the moment it began. This was Konoha. No matter who the invader was, the village would not do nothing. Here, he could make full use of every advantage. He'd also use the 2 days alone to get used to the Mangekyo Sharingan, exploring techniques carefully so he wouldn't overuse the dojutsu. With the Mangekyo at his side, he felt a little more confident. And for safety's sake, he'd spent money on tools: 20 shuriken, 4 forged kunai, and 30 exploding tags, neatly stowed in the pouch at his waist. Preparedness couldn't hurt. Time drifted by. Click. The clock's hour hand finally slid to 12. Shinji gripped a kunai and scanned the street for signs of an attack, but nothing happened. A few minutes later, he frowned. It won't be a prank, will it? Before he could finish the thought, the room vanished around him with a whoosh. Boom, boom. He came to himself in an unfamiliar palace as explosions rattled the air. He crouched and peered through a side window. In the courtyard, hundreds of guards armed with bows and swords were besieging a gargantuan dark blue creature, bloated, its upper body sprouting countless writhing arms. "Stop it! Protect His Highness!" Don't let it near the main hall. The guards shouted and attacked without ceasing. Arrows rained down. Some were tied with lit, exploding tags. The assaults did nothing. The monster was riddled with arrows and severed limbs, but it didn't slow. Limbs blown away regenerated almost instantly. Every time an arm flicked out, it caught a soldier and dragged him in, then swallowed him whole. Isn't that the hand demon? Shinji murmured from his hiding place. He recognized the creature from Demon Slayer, the hand demon that had slaughtered dozens at the training ground, but this one was far larger, swollen, and exuding a sickening stench. The courtyard filled with the metallic reek of blood. Dismembered bodies littered the ground like a living hell. As it devoured more guards, the hand demon kept growing. Its attacks hit harder, its regeneration sped up, and the frequency of its strikes increased. Eating people seemed to make it stronger, and not slowly. Shinji suspected the creature was absorbing the chakra of its victims. A demon with terrifying regeneration and the ability to take on chakra, the thought made his scalp prickle. The hand demon moaned as it ate, a wet, disgusted sound. How delicious! These people are exquisite, oh ah! Is this the invader? Shinji forced himself to calm down. Ordinary attacks were useless unless they targeted a demon's real weakness. The brave guards had shot, slashed, and exploded the beast time and again. It didn't die. Worse, it could recover by eating them. He knew Demon Slayer weaknesses: sunlight, which turned even the strongest to ash, the neck, which could be slain with a Nichiren blade, and wisteria, which demons feared. He had none of those things. It was past midnight, a long way from sunrise. From the guards' uniforms and the exploding tags they used, this palace was clearly in the ninja world, likely the estate of a daimyo. That would explain the guards' courage and determination. They had even severed and blown off more than a dozen of the demon's arms, once destroying half its body with an explosion, but the creature recovered each time. Now, bloated from feeding, it looked like a moving mountain of flesh. Where are the reinforcements? Why aren't they here? A guard screamed as they were picked off. The hand demon's footsteps made the earth tremble. Buildings crumbled like tofu before it. It turned toward the main hall and began to drag its swollen body that way. Shinji breathed easier for a moment. Apparently it hadn't noticed him. Then an arm shot out from the demon's back, slicing a hole through the wall with a foul, fishy stench. It snatched the hiding spot where Shinji crouched. Before he could react, the arm seized him, retracted, and hauled him up toward the creature's maw. Its voice, sickening and almost childlike, bubbled with anticipation. "Oh ho ho, I smelled you ages ago. You smell better than the others. So tasty, my mouth waters." The hand demon stared at Shinji with drool dripping from its malformed mouth. Disgust washed over him. Suddenly, the beast's expression sharpened into a kind of lunacy. "So you are the light of this realm. Don't run away." Light? Shinji thought. The demon's reaction made it clear his presence was significant here. The beast's countless arms fluttered and swayed like some frenzied crown. It held Shinji above its gaping maw. "If I eat you, I can stay here forever. This is my paradise." "Paradise?" Shinji spat. "If you think this place is heaven, you're mistaken. This is hell." Before he finished speaking, Shinji's eyes flared crimson. New book period. Please show some love. Chapter 5. I quit. Boom. A yellow phantom erupted from Shinji's body with a roar, instantly wrenching his arm free from Hand Demon's grasp. It resolved into a colossal, torso-only skeletal apparition of bone and shadow. Amid the swirling dust, Shinji stood beneath it like a god. His scarlet eyes flashed Ikkyo pattern, 3 interlocking rings, and a cold, murderous intent radiated from him. Hand Demon gaped. "You? What are you?" Before he could finish, Shinji drew forth Susanoo and brought a crushing punch down. The blow hit with the force of a falling mountain. Hand Demon's seemingly solid form could not withstand Susanoo's terrifying might. His body exploded into pieces, flesh and blood spraying everywhere. The courtyard, already a bloody mess, became even more chaotic. But in only a few breaths, the gore in the crater began to squirm and swell, reforming into the abomination. Hand Demon laughed through a hand pressed to his mouth. "As expected of light! You can't kill me! You can't kill me!" Shinji made a clipped sound and activated Susanoo again, sending another devastating blow. The demon shattered, only to stitch itself back together as the blood and flesh crawled. Shinji did not wait. Each time the gore started to crawl, he struck again and again. Boom, 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 relentless. Suzanu's heavy fists shattered the ground, widening the crater and throwing cracks dozens of meters outward. Nearby buildings shuddered and collapsed in sequence. Even a corner of the main hall, farther off, crumbled. After a moment, Shinji stopped. The mass on the ground recovered far more slowly than before. Hand Demon reformed at last, but he was much reduced in size compared to the monstrous thing that had swallowed hundreds of guards. Horrible. Weakness replaced Hand Demon's earlier madness. He had never imagined facing such a being. The sight of Shinji's Mangekyo had made him quake. He wanted to flee, wanted to feed to regain strength, but the Susanoo blocking his way had shattered those hopes. He took a timid step back. "No, you don't even have a Nichiren blade. How could I die by your hand?" Shinji walked forward slowly. "You still don't understand where you are," he said. "Soon you'll miss the sun and the Nichiren blade." The demon's pupils pinched to tiny dots. Fear swallowed him. His will collapsed in an instant. Shinji seized the moment, Susanoo flared, and he struck once more. Hand Demon shattered. This time, the blood and flesh did not crawl back together. They crumbled into ash and scattered on the wind. Invasion successfully blocked, rift closing. A calm, mechanical voice chimed at his side. Shinji exhaled and sank to his knees. The towering Susanoo faded away as if it had never been. "Why does an Uchiha remnant like me have to be the one protecting the ninja world?" he muttered. He was beginning to understand. The invasion had been incursions of extra-dimensional beings like Hand Demon into the ninja world. His role, the light the demon had named him, was apparently to stop those intrusions. He understood the mechanics now, but hated the idea. He'd been dragged into this without his say-so and forced to fight a monster he'd have otherwise been eaten by if not for his Mankyo. He tossed his head and grumbled aloud whether anyone could hear him. "Fine, I'll do it this time, but that's it, no more." Scanning for spoils of war, basic breathing method, water breathing. A blurred orb of light coalesced where Hand Demon had turned to ash. Shinji approached and reached out. Because the breathing methods in Demon Slayer are breathing-based forms that enhance cardiopulmonary power, anyone with talent and training can learn them. No bloodline is required. For Shinji, whose jutsu didn't depend on complex chakra nature changes, this was useful. As his fingers closed around the light, fragments of memory poured into him. Lessons and technique, the feel of water-flowing forms. He understood why water breathing had been the spoils. Hand Demon had eaten more than a dozen swordsmen who'd learned that style, and their memory fragments had become part of him. Reward settlement in progress. Rating. Received Ninja World's gift, chakra, small amount. Specks of light appeared and streamed into Shinji, warming and settling inside him. It felt like slipping into a hot spring when utterly exhausted, soothing and delicious. He couldn't help a small sound of relief. The small amount of chakra the system gave him nearly doubled what he already had. He scowled inwardly. "You didn't have to emphasize small amount so much," he muttered. A small amount that doubled his chakra suggested his original reserve was tiny to begin with, and the rating E was poor. Was it low because Hand Demon had caused so much destruction? Or because the invasion lasted too long? Crack. A sound came from the ruins nearby. A survivor? Shinji snapped his head toward it. A small head peered out from the wreckage of the main hall, blinking big eyes smeared with dust. Panic tightened Shinji's chest. His Mangekyo had been exposed. If word got out, Danzo in the village, Orochimaru, and half a dozen others would hunt him for that power. He moved quickly but deliberately to the ruins. Up close, the childlike figure looked familiar. He studied the violet eyes, the dust-caked hair, and a name rose in his mind. "Shion?" he whispered. The girl said, curious and blinking, "Big brother with the red eye, do you know me?" Shinji murmured under his breath, "So this is the palace of the Land of Demons priestess." His heart thudded with conflicting emotions, relief at finding a survivor, and dread at what his exposed eye could bring. "Thank you all for your votes and donations. I saw many familiar faces. Thank you so much." Chapter 6. Shinji's Kaleidoscope Pupil Technique. From Shion's astonished expression, Shinji knew she had seen his fierce fight with the Hand Demon. In other words, his Susanoo had been exposed, and the secret of his Mangekyo Sharingan would be difficult to hide. Shion didn't know about his inner turmoil. She simply looked him over, admiration in her eyes. "Should I silence her?" she asked. Shinji couldn't bring himself to. Whoosh! Sensing a trace of killing intent from him, the small bell hanging on Shion's chest suddenly flared with a dazzling light. "This is—" he started. He took a step back. Others might not know, but he understood the Land of Demons priestess's true capabilities. The bell on Shion's chest was a powerful magical artifact. It seemed to protect her, but in reality, it sealed her priestess powers, preventing the young girl from recklessly unleashing them and harming those around her. Plainly put, it was a restraint disguised as a protective charm. To kill Shion, he would first have to destroy that bell, and after the bell was gone, he would face the full, unsealed power of the Land of Demons priestess. Shinji abandoned the idea. Shion was inexperienced now, true, but so was he. He couldn't be sure his Susanoo could withstand her sealing technique. After all, the Land of Demons priestess could seal things on the scale of tailed beasts. But letting her go without doing anything wasn't an option either. He opted for genjutsu. Focusing his Mangekyo Sharingan on her, he imposed a psychological suggestion through his dojutsu. "You haven't seen me." Instantly, Shion's face went blank, and she began to repeat the phrase unconsciously. "Haven't seen, haven't seen." "Did it work?" he murmured. He watched her carefully and let out a quiet sigh of relief. Fortunately, her priestess power was sealed, and her time of awareness was short. Otherwise, with his half-formed Mangekyo Genjutsu, it would have been difficult to plant even this simple suggestion. Even so, he didn't feel entirely secure. If they met again, there was a real chance she'd recover the memory. Thankfully, as the Land of Demons priestess, she rarely left that domain, so a near-term encounter was unlikely. A glow of torchlight appeared in the distance, guards rushing toward the palace. Reinforcements. Shinji was still worrying how to return to Konoha when, whoosh, his figure vanished from the room. He blinked and found himself back in his familiar bedchamber. The wall clock showed about 30 minutes had passed, the same span of time between when he'd first seen the hand demon slaughter the guards and when he'd killed it. In other words, he had been instantaneously teleported to the site of the invasion, the priestess's palace, and then instantly returned when it ended. It felt somewhat like the Flying Thunder God technique. A sudden, sharp pain stabbed his eyes. He forced his lids shut, deactivating his Mangekyo Sharingan. The crimson irises faded back to ink black. The sting lingered for some time. He exhaled slowly, grim-faced. Thwarting the invasion had doubled his chakra reserves, but chakra was chakra, and dojutsu was dojutsu. Chakra could be replenished through rest, renewable. The Mangekyo's power, however, was high-quality yin-release chakra, a fixed reserve formed when the Mangekyo awakens. Whatever was used was gone. Without the ability to convert normal chakra into that special yin chakra, the Mangekyo's consumption could not be replenished. This time, activating Susanoo took too much, he thought. If I do this several more times, I'll ruin my Mangekyo. In the heat of combat, he'd activated Susanoo without hesitation. The eye pain had forced the harsh truth on him. The Mangekyo Sharingan was consumable. He sat on the bed, head in his hands. The invader had been a demon from Demon Slayer, so the next invasion would likely be another demon. But he wasn't specialized in fighting demons. To kill the hand demon, he'd used the most cumbersome method. After pounding it with Susanoo and watching it regenerate, he observed with his Mangekyo that its body was slightly smaller each time it recovered. Demons could regenerate, but they needed to consume flesh and blood to do so. Hit them repeatedly in a short time so they couldn't replenish and their regeneration would fail. That worked on the bulky hand demon, but a faster, more agile demon would be another story. He had to find a real countermeasure. Nichiren blades were the simplest method, clean decapitation, but he didn't know if the ninja world had the special ore for forging Nichiren, nor had he seen wisteria flowers in Konoha. Sunlight would work against demons, so what about Amaterasu, the flame of the sun? Amaterasu's black flames burned without ever extinguishing. Even if it wasn't a special counter like a Nichiren, burning a demon endlessly might incinerate it. Unfortunately, his Mangekyo didn't grant Amaterasu. Both of his eyes shared the same technique, Susanoo Lantern. As the name suggested, it was built on Susanoo. To use Susanoo Lantern, he first had to activate Susanoo. Unlike single-eye techniques like Amaterasu or Tsukuyomi, Susanoo Lantern was a rare functional ability. When Susanoo and Susanoo Lantern were activated together, his Susanoo's face would show a second pair of empty eye sockets, receptacles for another pair of eyes. In other words, it allowed his Susanoo to wield a second pair of eyes. Perhaps the technique reflected both the original owner and him, the transmigrator. It was powerful, but useless without a second pair of eyes to place in those sockets. At present, his Mangekyo was essentially a blank slate, with only Susanoo as a usable power. And compared to other Mangekyo abilities, Susanoo placed a far greater burden on the body and consumed enormous dojutsu reserves. He couldn't fight every battle relying solely on it. There were solutions. The most direct was to find another pair of Mangekyo and awaken an eternal Mangekyo, at least to obtain a second pair for Susanoo Lantern and to gain more usable techniques. He thought over the Mangekyo in the ninja world. Excluding his own, there were 4 pairs left. Obito's pair, one with Obito himself, the other with Kakashi; Shisui's pair, one taken by Danzo, the other kept by Itachi, Itachi's own; and the deceased Uchiha clan head Fugaku's. Those held by powerful figures were well guarded. The only realistic target was Fugaku's. Fugaku had never revealed his Mangekyo before his death. The village had likely confiscated his Sharingan without realizing it was Mangekyo, so its security wouldn't be as tight. Shinji remembered the morgue that night, the medical team removing Sharingan from Uchiha bodies and placing them in nutrient jars. With so many eyes collected at once, the individual value of each might be diminished. Among the 4 pairs, Fugaku's seemed the easiest to obtain. But first he needed to find where the village stored the Sharingan. He couldn't rush. One mistake could cost him the eyes and his life. Improving his taijutsu and ninjutsu quickly was also a top priority. As the adrenaline of the battle faded, so did his energy. Sleep crept over him. He lay back and let the exhaustion take him. Chapter 7. I didn't expect it to work either. Bang! Bang! Early that morning, Shinji was jolted awake by someone knocking on his door. He yawned, went to the door, opened it, and asked, "What is it?" Haku stood there with a smile. "Shinji, you're going to be late." "Huh?" Shinji glanced at the clock on his wall and saw it was almost 8. He hurried to wash up and rushed out. On the way to the Ninja Academy, he realized he'd forgotten his lunch again. Haku noticed and pulled a bento box from his bag, handing it over. "Don't worry, I made this for you. I hope you like it." Shinji opened it to find neatly packed sushi and dango, fresh sashimi, and vegetables, clearly prepared with care. "Thanks," he said. Haku waved it off. "We're classmates. No need to be so formal." Shinji accepted the bento with a nod. He knew Haku was naturally kind, but he still felt Haku was a little too friendly, as if trying deliberately to get close to him. Theory class passed quickly. After eating, Shinji joined the others at the training ground. It was free practice time, and the place was bustling. Naruto, a year younger, sat on a swing in the corner sulking because he couldn't join the others. Neji was at a wooden dummy practicing gentle fist and sweating profusely. Lee was running laps with single-minded energy. I should find somewhere to train, Shinji decided. He slipped away to a small secluded grove on the school grounds. Sifting through the fragmented memories left by the original owner, he chose to start with Fire Release, Great Fireball Technique, a jutsu the original owner had practiced countless times. Snake, ram, monkey, boar, horse, tiger. He refined his chakra, executed the hand seals with care, and aimed at a large tree not far away. Boom! A massive fireball erupted from his mouth, billowing forward and striking the tree. It ignited instantly, flames catching on the surrounding grass and spreading. Shinji stood rooted, watching the towering blaze. In the original owner's memories, this jutsu had been practiced over and over without success. Shinji hadn't expected anything special. He'd only planned to practice the seals. To his surprise, it not only worked on the first try, but unleashed tremendous power. In moments, the fire had spread to other trees, and a large area was burning. Footsteps and shouts hastened toward the grove. Teachers from the academy, alerted by the smoke, arrived to find the fire raging. Their faces tightened. "Earth release, earth wall," one shouted. "Water release, water wave technique," another called. They worked together, one forming an earth barrier to contain the blaze while the other used water to douse the flames. After a tense struggle, the fire was finally stamped out. Steam rose from the scorched ground and the teachers stood disheveled. Iruka strode up to Shinji. "Shinji, did you do this?" he demanded. There was no denying it. Shinji nodded. Iruka scolded him sternly. "That was dangerous. How could you use such an advanced fire-release jutsu in the forest?" "I didn't expect it to succeed," Shinji muttered inwardly. If he'd realized it would cause such a commotion, he wouldn't have tried it at the academy. And it was supposed to be a C-rank, Chunin-level jutsu. How had it worked on his first attempt? What was so difficult about it, really? Mizuki came up smiling. "Iruka, don't be too hard on him. It didn't cause too much damage after all." The other teachers' faces were a mixture of concern and awe. To be able to perform such a powerful fire release at just 8 years old was terrifying evidence of Uchiha talent. Meanwhile, the commotion had drawn the students. They gathered around, whispering. "What happened? Is that a fire? The big trees are all scorched." When they found out Shinji was responsible, many stared in surprise. Shikamaru breathed a resigned, as expected of the Uchiha. Sakura and Ino gaped with stars in their eyes. "Wow, that senior is so cool." Lee looked stunned. "So amazing." Neiji's face was serious and guarded. At 7 or 8 years old, most academy students hadn't even started learning ninjutsu. Those who could use it were rare. Seeing someone so young perform a C-rank fire release with apparent ease set off an uneasy alarm in him. At the back, Naruto tried to squeeze in, but kept getting pushed aside as the crowd surged. Shinji sighed to himself. This was all more hassle than it was worth. Later in the classroom, Haku turned to him. "Shinji, I didn't expect you to have mastered such a powerful fire release." Shinji shrugged. "It's just a C-rank jutsu." His casual dismissal wasn't entirely to protect the Uchiha name. He honestly didn't feel proud. Itachi had learned the great fireball technique without even activating his Sharingan, simply by watching their father perform the seals once. Sasuke had been a bit slower, but he mastered it in a day. Sasuke had recently awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan and, after receiving a strange boon the night before, found his chakra doubled, far beyond his peers. In that light, mastering a C-rank fire jutsu didn't seem extraordinary. After all, ninjutsu is an application of chakra. If your chakra is abundant and strong, even single-handed seals, or none at all, can sometimes work. Shinji glanced at Haku, remembering that Haku had been a prodigy in single-handed seals and had impressed Kakashi himself. By the time classes ended that evening, the news had spread across the academy. Students who had once pitied him now looked at Shinji with admiration, and several girls followed him with starry eyes. Even some teachers treated him with more respect. There were precedents, the likes of Uchiha Shisui and recently Itachi, both of whom made a name for themselves early and rose rapidly in rank, so the teacher's change in attitude was understandable. Shinji let out a weary sigh. What a headache. Chapter 8, Solicit. The morning theory class ended with the bell. Students drifted out of the classroom, one by one, laughing and joking. Shinji declined Haku's invitation and, carrying his bento, slipped into a small, unused grove inside the ninja academy. Remembering yesterday's lesson, he decided not to use ninjutsu on the academy grounds. Instead, he would practice the breathing technique, water breathing, because cultivating a breathing technique is subtle and nearly impossible to detect without constant Byakugan surveillance. While he ate, he reviewed the memory fragments of swordsmen who had used water breathing. Someone stepped out of the trees. "Who's there?" Shinji looked up. A figure stood in the shadow of the trees. "Good vigilance," the man said. Shinji's expression stayed calm, but a cold alarm went off in his chest. The man was Danzo Shimura, the same Danzo who had pushed for the Uchiha Massacre. Danzo stared at him, aggression plain in his eyes. "Your talent is good," he said, "but talent alone won't win you revenge." "Who exactly are you?" Shinji asked, keeping his hostility measured. Danzo stepped forward, his face catching the sunlight. "I am an elder of the village. Joining my subordinate forces is your only chance for revenge." Shinji felt absurdity boil up. Danzo had played a central role in destroying the Uchiha, and now he had the nerve to use the promise of avenging Itachi to recruit an Uchiha survivor. First, he used Itachi to break the clan. Now he wanted to use Shinji to go after Itachi. He suppressed his disgust and said, I don't need anyone's help. I'll kill that person myself. Those who refuse this old man do not end well, Danzo snorted and turned away. Shinji watched him go without expression and thought, being targeted by someone like him is sickening. He probably wouldn't act openly against me right now. Shinji knew the relationship between Danzo and the third Hokage was delicate. In many ways, Danzo was part of the third's power structure, a tool the Hokage used to control Konoha. Not even great figures, Uchiha like Shisui or Itachi, or even powerful individuals like Orochimaru or Sakumo Hatake could openly confront Danzo in the village. Still, Danzo might act in secret, so Shinji needed to grow stronger quickly. He finished his bento, steadied his breath, and began to practice water breathing. Breathing techniques develop the body's potential. Water breathing is one of the 5 basic styles. Though it isn't as overwhelming as sun or moon breathing, it still brings significant bodily change. In Demon Slayer, ordinary swordsmen relied on these basic breathing techniques to fight demons that could regenerate endlessly. Having memory fragments from over a dozen water-breathing swordsmen, Shinji felt a natural affinity for it. After trying several breath rhythms guided by those memories, he started to find the rhythm. He exhaled, feeling the airflow and an odd synchrony in his heart and lungs. This wasn't normal breathing. Almost immediately his chest tightened, his heart and breath quickened, and the rhythm broke. He stopped the technique, secretly thrilled. According to the memories, it usually took a month of hard training just to sense the rhythm. Even Sabito had taken several days. Shinji had reached it on his first real try. That was largely because he had internalized the insights of more than a dozen swordsmen. The initial hurdle had been mentally rehearsed many times. But sensing the rhythm was only the beginning. The real challenge was conditioning the body to follow it. Without the organs keeping pace with total concentration, the chest would tighten and training would fail after a moment. I'll need daily practice to get every part of my body to keep up with this rhythm, he resolved. 2 weeks passed quickly. The strange invasion had not recurred, which eased Shinji slightly, but he stayed vigilant and continued to strengthen himself. After turning down Danzo's offer, Shinji rethought his training choices and finally accepted Haku as a sparring partner. Taijutsu can't improve without a good partner, and Haku was both classmate and neighbor. Training with him wouldn't attract suspicion, as long as they avoided another headline-making incident like almost burning down the academy. With Haku's help, Shinji's taijutsu, his weak point, improved fast. 2 weeks of hard training brought him up to the average level of his peers, enough that no one with ill intent would easily find a flaw. Haku never pried into why Shinji's taijutsu had been so weak. Instead, he thoughtfully devised training plans. Taijutsu is built on foundation. The stronger the base, the greater the potential. Shinji worked humbly and diligently to shore up what had been lacking. On the other side of the village, after more than 20 days in a coma, Sasuke woke in the hospital. At first, he refused to accept that his clan had been massacred. He wandered alone through the deserted Uchiha grounds, then stepped out into the drizzling rain, looking lost. "Why?" he muttered, walking like a puppet, expression vacant and aimless. His world had collapsed in a single night. In that short span, he had gone from the son of the head of Konoha's most prominent clan to a helpless orphan. Worse, the person responsible was his closest brother. Sasuke, once lively and cheerful, became withdrawn and brooding, as if he had no will to live. Shinji watched Sasuke from a distance. He noticed the village had not placed Sasuke in the same apartment block where Shinji lived. Instead, Sasuke was housed in lodgings near the Anbu building. That made it clear the village was keeping him under surveillance. It was understandable. Before defecting, Itachi had warned the third Hokage and Danzo that if anything happened to Sasuke in Konoha, he would release the village's top secrets to other nations. No one in Konoha took Itachi lightly after what he had done. Because of that, Shinji kept away. He deliberately put on an aloof air, feigning dislike for Sasuke and maintaining his distance to avoid drawing any attention. Chapter 9. Chunin Exam Boom. Amid the dull thud of fists and feet colliding, 2 figures staggered back. The secluded training ground echoed with the impact. Shinji and Haku were in the middle of a taijutsu spar. Shinji's latest attack had been neutralized again, and he frowned. After days of training, he could feel himself improving, but no matter how much closer he got, Haku always gave him the sense that victory was just one more push away, until he was knocked back, time and again. Let's try the breathing method, Shinji decided. Watch out. This time I'm going all out. Haku nodded solemnly, full concentration. Whoosh! Shinji exhaled and his body blurred. A straight punch shot for Haku's face. Surprise flickered in Haku's Byakugan. She hadn't expected his speed to spike so suddenly. Bang, bang, bang. 4 or 5 hits exchanged in an instant. With every strike, Shinji let out a misty breath. His movements fell into a rhythm, faster and harder than before. Haku, unaccustomed to the change, showed a flash of panic. Whoosh! He exhaled again, surging with speed. Shinji's body blurred past Haku, and he swept his leg in a side kick. But with a soft swish, Haku leapt, avoiding the kick and lightly tapping the tip of her foot against his sweeping leg. Using the momentum, she spun and returned a side kick of her own. This! Shinji was caught off guard, unable to change or dodge in time. He barely raised his arms to guard his vital points. A dull thud knocked him back, and the rhythm of his breathing method staggered. His arm tingled. He scowled. Haku, the force in that kick wasn't right. Are you holding back? Haku panted. Parrying your attacks takes a lot of effort, Shinji. How would I have energy left to intentionally hold back? You are, Shinji insisted, shaking his arm to ease the numbness. Haku didn't argue. She walked to the side of the training ground and handed him a bottle of water. Let's take a break. Shinji accepted the bottle and drank in silence. He knew Haku had already noticed the limits of his stamina. She'd been easing her own intensity to spare him and then asked for the break to hide the truth. After replaying their exchange in his head, he was certain the water-breathing technique helped his taijutsu a great deal. Without it, his foundation wasn't enough to threaten Haku at all. Even after only 2 weeks of practice, though still rough, the breathing method let him give Haku some trouble. My mastery of water breathing still isn't good enough. The rhythm is too easy to lose, he thought. Haku sipped quietly and asked casually, Shinji, you're already strong. Why do you train so hard? If he said it was to protect the ninja world, would she believe him? Shinji thought. Who knew what kind of monster might invade next? He couldn't afford complacency. Seeing Shinji's silence, Haku probed further. Is it because of that person? Why? Why did he do such a thing? Shinji glanced at her and looked away. I don't know. The person she meant was Uchiha Itachi, the one who had slaughtered his entire clan. Many in the village had the same question. Why would the young clan head annihilate his own family? Shinji suspected Haku worried about him and about the Uchiha more than she let on. The next day at school, the announcement surprised Shinji. What? The Chunin exams? He muttered. Iruka-sensei explained the arrangements. Lower-grade students like them would be on holiday while the exams took place. Shinji thought of the Chunin exams from Naruto's time. They occurred every 3 years and varied in scale. Sometimes they were huge, sometimes smaller. The venue wasn't always Konoha. Allied or cooperative villages could host the exams too. This is great. We get a holiday, students cheered. I heard a lot of villages are sending teams this time. Should be a good show. For the villagers, the exams were almost a festival. People could even buy tickets for the final rounds. After class, Shinji and Haku walked through the streets. A commotion ahead caught their attention. A procession was approaching, lavish and formal, a magnificent carriage at its center. It looks like the Land of Demons emblem, Haku said. Is the Land of Demons priestess coming to the Chunin exams? Shinji's face went stiff. The priestess? Haku nodded. The one in the carriage is probably the Land of Demons priestess. Why is she in Konoha? Has my genjutsu been dispelled? Shinji's heart picked up. He watched the procession's path and wondered if it was heading for the Hokage's office. Haku noticed his tension. What's wrong? Are you feeling ill? He forced himself to shake his head and stepped off the main street. Shion's appearance in Konoha now was unusual, but this was the village center, just a few streets from the Hokage building. Any rash action could have unpredictable consequences. All he could do was hope his psychological suggestion on her hadn't been broken. He spent the day on edge. No Anbu came to control him, and no rumors about him or the Mangekyo Sharingan spread. Shion's arrival had seemed unrelated. Later, teams from Sunagakure, the Grass Village, Omegakure, Takigakure, and the Hidden Mist arrived one after another. That worried Shinji. Konoha's relations with the Hidden Mist were strained. The Mist hardly ever sent people to Konoha's exams. The turnout from other villages was also unusually high. They're using the Chunin exams as a pretense, Shinji thought. They're here to verify the rumor about the Uchiha Massacre. Of course, the Uchiha were a storied clan, nearly 1,000 years old and long prominent in the ninja world. News of their annihilation would be explosive. Those villages coming in force made sense if they wanted confirmation. That evening, Shinji didn't slack off. He pulled Haku back into taijutsu practice. During a break, towel in hand, he asked, "Why is the Land of Demons sending someone to the exams? Do they even have a ninja village?" Haku shook her head. "I've never heard of a Land of Demons ninja village." "Then why would the priestess be here?" Haku laughed. "I'm not sure, but I heard she spent the day touring the village and visited a lot of shops." Shinji nodded, lost in thought. Rustle. Something moved in the shrubs beside the training ground. Both of them turned. A small figure emerged, hurried, and a little flustered. She wore a bright, ornate gown and chewed noisily on a skewer of 3-colored dango. Shion. Shinji's heart lurched. The Land of Demons priestess himself and Haku had been talking about. She had slipped out of the procession and into a secluded place. Shion hadn't expected anyone there. She put a finger to her lips as if to shush them, then lifted her gown and began to sneak away. After a few steps, she stopped, cocked her head, then ran back to Shinji and stared intently at him. "You." Shinji hadn't expected to run into Shion again like that, and his heart went tight. Shion cocked her head. I feel like I've seen you before, but I can't remember where." Shinji shook his head. "We haven't met." "Is that so?" She frowned, thinking hard. Shinji kept his face calm, though inside he was a little flustered. He still wasn't entirely sure his genjutsu had worked. Haku, standing beside him, watched Shion as curiously as Shinji did. "Your Highness, where are you going?" He murmured. Shouts from nearby cut through them. "Kid, get out of the way!" When the guards closed in, Shion didn't hesitate. She shoved Shinji aside and vanished in a blur. Shinji's mouth twitched. He muttered under his breath, "One minute she calls me big brother, the next it's kid. This girl." Not long after, several Land of Demons guards came pouring down the street, sweating and carrying cloth-wrapped bundles. They questioned Shinji and Haku about which way Shion had gone, apologized as they ran, then continued the chase. Once the guards disappeared, Haku chuckled. "So that was the priestess of the Land of Demons. She's a handful." Shinji let out a quiet sigh of relief. The unexpected encounter had unsettled him, but it also proved something important. The psychological suggestion he had slipped into Shion with his Manjikyo Sharingan still seemed to be taking effect. If so, her visit to Konoha was probably just for refuge. In the original timeline, the Land of Demons sought Konoha's help as soon as the priestess was attacked. With the Hand Demon's onslaught, hundreds of guards slaughtered in one night, it made sense they would send their young priestess to Konoha for safety. The land was under siege. A voice cut through Shinji's thoughts, familiar and unwelcome. "Countdown, 3, it said, as clear as if spoken into his ear. Haku beside him didn't react at all. Shinji glanced at him. Haku merely asked, "Shall we keep training?" "No, let's go back." Back in his apartment, after closing the door, Shinji's face hardened. The countdown voice, 3 days, rooted a new, icy unease in him. The next day, Konoha buzzed with visiting Shinobi for the Chunin exams. Shinji was on leave, but kept training taijutsu with Haku at the training ground. During a break, Haku smiled and said, "The old woman at the dumpling stall said the priestess slipped out of the Land of Demons' guest house again this morning and wandered the village." "Oh," Shinji sounded casual, though he intended to avoid Shion for now. Haku added, "There's supposed to be a fireworks festival tonight to welcome all the visiting nin. Our classmates are having a barbecue and fireworks. Want to go, Shinji?" Shinji waved him off. "I'll pass." "Then I won't go either," Haku said. That night, fireworks bloomed over the village, boom after boom. Shinji leaned by his window, expression blank. Up close, his eyes were unfocused. He wasn't watching the show so much as letting his mind reel through possibilities. Next door, Haku stared at the sky with an unusually grave look. He paused on one small, unobtrusive spark, and then, with a soft sigh, went to the wardrobe and changed. Not far away, Sasuke sat alone by a small lake, knees hugged to his chest. He didn't look at the sky above. He watched the fireworks reflected on the water. The bright life of the festival sickened him in a way that made his mood sour. The reflection warped in his sight, briefly becoming the face he hated most. "I'll kill you," he spat. He pulled a kunai and plunged into the lake with a splash. Shinji dismissed the reckless thought that had flickered through his head. Breaking into the Anbu building for Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan would be suicidal. No matter how badly he wanted it, he wouldn't force his way in. He had to find another way. And why was the countdown so short this time? He couldn't use Susanoo every time. Just as a firework cracked overhead, Shinji heard a faint click from next door, the soft sound of a door closing. He almost didn't notice it. Haku was leaving at this hour? Shinji shrugged it off at first. The village was lively and people wandered at night. But after the click, there were no regular footsteps, only a whisper of movement. Shinji crept to his own door, listening, and could barely make out Haku's light steps down the stairs. Sneaky. What is he up to? Shinji decided to follow. He misjudged his tracking and soon lost Haku in the crowd. From a distance, he watched Haku slip into the busy street. He must be meeting someone. He's being careful. Whoever it is must be important. As he walked, Shinji thought about Haku's presence in Konoha and that subtle curiosity Haku had shown about him in the Uchiha. It made Shinji uneasy. Was Haku a spy? Working for someone high up? He couldn't tell. Passing a small stall of masks, Shinji stopped. A memory of Shion catching a glimpse of his face during the first invasion made him buy a fox mask like an Anbu would wear. Once bitten, twice shy, next time he'd disguise himself better. He tied the mask at his waist and kept moving until he found himself at the secluded training ground in the little forest where he and Haku often sparred. The village's festival noises echoed among the trees. Shinji decided to practice water breathing for a while. He was just getting into the rhythm when two sharp whooshes cut through the night. Instinctively, he slipped into the bushes. Two figures landed in the clearing, one fleeing, one in pursuit. Even with the mask on, Shinji recognized Haku in the front hand. The other was an Anbu ninja. The Anbu leveled a glare at the masked Haku. "Humph," he said. "I was only monitoring the kid next door, but I never expected you'd show up. Big fish, caught, surrender. There's nowhere to run." Shinji pressed himself lower in the foliage, watching the scene unfold, pulse quickening at the new complication. Haku is definitely problematic. Hidden in the shadows, Shinji felt his face tighten. What shocked him most was that the Anbu chasing Haku had originally been assigned to keep an eye on him inside the training ground. Above them, another firework burst and faded. The Anbu glanced up and chuckled. "Meeting tonight, huh? You picked a time. Almost got away with it." Haku said nothing, only backing away. "The village is far too lenient. You and that kid next door should be wiped out like pests." The Anbu's tone turned icy. Haku didn't hesitate any longer. With a whoosh, he bolted into the trees beside the training ground and fled. The Anbu snorted and moved to give chase, but as he turned his head, he caught motion from a nearby thicket. A figure wearing a fox mask slipped out from the bushes. "Who?" the Anbu snapped, drawing a kunai and narrowing his eyes. Under the fox mask, Shinji stared. He had been so close to Haku lately that if Haku was captured, Shinji would almost certainly be implicated. The Anbu's words had been laced with malice. This had to be Root working for Danzo, and their oversight of him could easily become an excuse to cause trouble. If he let them take Haku, Danzo would have every reason to drag him in too. Fireworks still dotted the night. In the glow, Shinji and the Root Anbu faced each other in the empty training ground, the air tense. A rustle came from the bushes. Both warriors snapped their attention. The Root threw his kunai toward the sound. A small head popped out of the undergrowth, an apple still hanging from its mouth, and huge, curious eyes took in the two figures. "Shion?" Shinji blurted. The kunai flew straight for her. There wasn't time to think. Instinctively, Shinji thrust out his left hand, and a yellow phantom-like projection surged from him, forming a giant skeletal arm that snatched Shion out of the bushes. The kunai clanged harmlessly against the spectral bones. For a heartbeat, all three of them, Shinji, the Root, and Shion, were stunned. Shion blinked as if she'd just woken, then beamed up at him. "Big brother, is that you? You saved me again. The root's face went white as he stared at the towering skeletal arm. Who exactly are you? He demanded. Beneath his mask, Shinji felt equally bewildered. He hadn't meant to manifest Susanoo. Why had it come out now? Shion wore a bell amulet. That should have made her immune to his implant. He cursed himself inwardly for revealing a glimpse of his power. They moved at once. Shion scrambled out, abandoning the fallen apple, and ran to Shinji. The root tried to back away, but Shinji's Mangekyo Sharingan locked onto him first. The Anbu's crouch froze mid-motion. His body seized as if he'd crashed into an invisible wall. Shinji exhaled with relief. Having stalled the root with Genjutsu, he turned to Shion. She gripped his arm, bright-eyed. Big brother, last time I couldn't even thank you before you left. Shinji, having dispelled the Susanoo, felt vulnerable. Whatever mental suggestion he had put into Shion earlier with his Mangekyo had been broken the moment Susanoo erupted. Shion babbled on, eager and earnest. What's your name? Are you a Konoha shinobi? Can we be friends? Shinji tried to pull his hand away. Shion cut him off with a knowing pout. I know. You don't want to tell anyone. I promise I won't tell. It'll be our little secret. Little secret. Shinji felt the weight of it and after a long hesitation, nodded. Really? Shion's face lit up. Really? Shinji removed the fox mask, showing her his face. If you don't believe me, look into my eyes. She obeyed. His pupils flashed with that uncanny light that made people fixate, and Shinji's gaze sharpened. Quietly, he activated the Mangekyo and reimplanted the suggestion he'd lost. You didn't meet anyone here, he murmured into the Genjutsu. Shion's expression blurred into emptiness, and she echoed, I didn't meet anyone. Didn't meet anyone. When the suggestion took hold, Shinji touched her shoulder and whispered, Sleep. Shion went limp and slid to the ground, out like a candle. He looked at her sleeping form and then at the root ninja, still trapped in the Genjutsu, and let his thoughts run. He wasn't surprised that Haku was dangerous. Haku came from the Hidden Mist's ice release bloodline. Haku's presence at Konoha's academy was odd enough. But whatever Haku was, Shinji had to protect him for now. He'd helped cover Haku's escape because the boy needed time to grow, and he couldn't give Danzo the excuse to move against him. Haku was likely a spy planted in Konoha by another village. How he had managed it, Shinji didn't know. Then he remembered the root's aside about how cleverly Haku and his contact had timed the meeting. Tonight, when the village's manpower was at its most stretched because of the festival fireworks, it meant this was the perfect time to act. Shinji glanced toward the Anbu building and felt the old familiar tug of a dangerous choice. He could risk more to buy Haku and himself precious time. He would have to decide, and decide quickly. Chapter 12. Sasuke Uchiha, you are under arrest. It should be remembered that the Uchiha clan once provided the village's police force. With the Uchiha now annihilated, and so many experienced Dujutsu users dead, the impact on Konoha was immediate and severe. Losing such a large cadre of elite shinobi produced an obvious manpower shortage. And in the past 2 days, visits from hundreds of ninja and important figures from other villages, the Land of Demons, Sunagakure, Kirigakure, Amegakure, the Grass Village, and Takigakure, had only made the shortage worse. All of them were ostensibly here for the Chunin exams. No one could be sure of their true intentions. Vigilance and surveillance could not be neglected, but they demanded people to carry them out. Tonight, the Anbu building, which would normally be heavily guarded, was likely to be thinly manned. That created a blind spot. A firework bloomed in the night sky, its colors reflecting across Sasuke's face. The faint ache behind his eyes reminded him of something urgent. He had to acquire Uchiha Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan as soon as possible. If his own Mangekyo began to decline, his chances of succeeding in whatever he intended would only slip away. He tore his gaze from the distance and looked at the root shinobi caught in his genjutsu. The man had seen Sasuke's Susanoo. If he were left alive, he would be a threat. Sasuke forced himself to stay calm, sorted his thoughts, and stepped forward. He took a few exploding tags from his pouch and tucked them into the man's clothing. Then he activated his Mangekyo and planted a suggestion. Go to Sunagakure's encampment and detonate the explosive tags on your body. A quick, crucial addendum followed. Detonate them in an uninhabited area. Do not harm the innocent. Terror flashed across the root shinobi's face. His consciousness hadn't been wiped clean. He still had a shred of resistance. But the lower limit of the Mangekyo's coercive power was enough. He slumped into a daze, compelled to obey, and shuffled away toward the Sunagakure camp. After the man had left, Sasuke glanced at Shion, unconscious on the ground, then turned and hurried for the Anbu building. He knew the village layout well and slipped close to the building's shadowed side. Pulling on a fox mask, he used the transformation technique to make himself look like an ordinary Anbu operative. The transformation technique was one of the basic three-body techniques and had been mastered by the original Uchiha host before his death. After several private trials, Sasuke could use it cleanly. Transformations are easy to learn, but hard to perfect. The larger the change, the finer the chakra control required, so he kept his alterations minimal, just a little added height and a proper Anbu uniform. The mask itself was a real piece of equipment, minimizing any telltale flaws. Fireworks still popped in the distance, but Sasuke had no time to watch. He fixed his gaze on the brightly lit Anbu building and rehearsed his plan for once inside. Then, a different sound cracked through the night, a loud explosion, not a firework. The blast alerted the Anbu. Within moments, 7 or 8 figures flashed out of the building and ran toward the disturbance. Sasuke breathed and walked in. As expected, the Anbu building, which should have felt like a den of tigers, was strikingly empty. Wearing the Anbu disguise, he walked boldly past the first floor's sparse traffic. One Anbu passed him in a hurry and ignored him. Sasuke almost activated his Mangekyo in reflex but restrained himself. He let out a soft breath and took in the layout. The first floor housed reception rooms, changing quarters, and equipment lockers. Important areas, the warehouse, the archives, would be on the second floor or underground. He circled once and found no sign of a basement entrance. That meant the second floor. On the stairs, he brushed past an Anbu with a dog-face mask who was heading down. Sasuke thought he was safe. Then the other man stopped. "Hold on, which squad are you with?" The dog-masked Anbu asked. Sasuke's heart tightened. Without skipping a beat, he lied. "Lord Danzo sent me to tally the sealed Sharingan." The dog-masked Anbu's eyes narrowed. Weren't the Sharingan already taken by Lord Danzo? He broke off, suspicion flaring. He formed hand signs and shouted, "Water release! Water spout technique!" A towering pillar of water blasted toward Sasuke. He'd anticipated scrutiny and was prepared, but the sudden decisiveness of the attack startled him. The water struck, and before he could fully react, the dog-masked Anbu continued, sealing the assault with hand signs. Water release, water prison technique. The rushing column of water began to harden and reshape. Sasuke felt the wall of water closing around him. On instinct, he tapped into his breathing method, total concentration, water breathing, 6th form, twisting vortex, and used the water's affinity to spin through it. At the last instant, he stepped off the water's surface and slipped free as the prison slammed shut. Heart-pounding, Sasuke broke into a sprint for the nearest window and pulled a long string of exploding tags from his pouch. The dog-masked Anbu's face changed the moment he realized his water prison had failed. He formed new seals and spat another technique, water release, water bullet technique. The water prison burst apart and a storm of water bullets shredded the corridor. Sasuke detonated the exploding tags behind him. Boom! The hallway erupted in smoke and debris. Under the cover of blast and shadow, dripping and disheveled, Sasuke slammed through the window and dropped to the ground outside. Pain flared in his back. The exploding tags hadn't completely blocked the water bullet technique. 1 or 2 streams had found him. He couldn't pause to count the cost. He pushed his breathing technique harder to staunch the bleeding, then vanished into the shadows at speed. His escape route had been planned. Though messy, his retreat was not panicked. Once he reached a blind corner, he released the transformation technique. He threw the cracked fox mask into a small nearby pond. Water would help erase scent. He dove into the pool without hesitation. Splash. He broke the surface and poked his head out. As the cold water soaked him, a thought struck him. Itachi's reflection on the pond earlier had been an illusion of his own mind. He drifted a short distance and noticed the damaged fox mask bobbing on the water. He swam over, dragged it ashore, and stared at the spiderweb of cracks in the lacquer. "Have you been abandoned too?" he asked the useless mask, feeling the loneliness between them. The water's surface was still when several Ambu landed around him like falling shadows. The dog-masked one stepped forward, eyes taking in the drenched man and the broken fox mask clenched in his hand. His voice was cold and official. Uchiha Sasuke, you are under arrest. Chapter 13. Are you all so busy tonight? Did I lose them? Shinji slowed as he wound through the village, listening for footsteps. When no Ambu chased after him, he let out a long, shaky breath. The moment he relaxed, a hot sting flared along the wound in his back. He frowned. The cut wasn't deep. He'd been using his breathing technique along the way to staunch the bleeding, so he hadn't lost much blood. The real problem was how conspicuous the injury would be if Danzo got wind of it. If Danzo found that the men he'd left to watch Shinji had mysteriously blown themselves up outside the Sunagakure outpost, he'd sniff around. A fresh wound on Shinji's back could be tied to the Anbu building break-in and the deaths of the root operatives, and the finger would point straight at an Uchiha remnant. The thought made Shinji's chest tighten. It had been too risky. He hadn't expected the dog-masked Anbu to be so sharp, detecting him and moving in less than a second, leaving no room to react. Their ninjutsu was smooth and practiced. Surprise, containment, then an explosive release, all linked. If he hadn't been proficient with his breathing technique, water breathing, he might have had to unleash Susanoo to break free. Shinji slipped into a narrow alley, trying to decide whether to leave the village altogether. Someone was coming the other way, walking fast. Karen? He stopped. It was Karen, his classmate. She looked as surprised as he did. For a moment, she didn't greet him. She simply hurried past. Shinji didn't want to attract attention either, so he let her go. But as they brushed by, she froze, turned, and asked, "Are you hurt?" "Aye." He opened his mouth, then stopped. Before he could explain, Karen rolled up her sleeve and offered him her pale forearm. "Bite me, quick." Shinji blinked. He knew about Karen's strange constitution. Her bite could heal injuries, but she'd offered her arm without a word. Bewildered, he realized it was the fastest way out and didn't hesitate. He bit down on her arm. A warm current flowed from his mouth into the wound on his back. The pain eased, replaced by a prickling tingle. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Karen nodded once and, without another word, darted off. Watching her hurry away, Shinji muttered under his breath, "Is everyone this busy tonight?" The chance meeting had solved the immediate problem, but there was no time to relax. He ran back to his apartment, changed out of his clothes, and burned them to ashes. In the bathroom mirror, he checked the wound. Both cuts on his back had closed completely, no scars left behind. He sat on the bed and thought hard. I still need an alibi. If he wanted to erase suspicion, he needed a credible witness, someone influential who could vouch that he'd been somewhere else all night. Shion came to mind, the priestess who had fainted at the training ground. The priestess of the Land of Demons was a national figure. Even the Hokage treated her with deference. She had no ties to the Uchiha, so her testimony would be hard for Danzo to dismiss. Shinji set out and found her sleeping face down on the training ground, snoring softly. He nudged her. "Hey, wake up!" Shion blinked, sat up, and rubbed her eyes. "How did I fall asleep? How would I know?" Shinji said, watching her closely. The Mangekyo Sharingan was powerful for Genjutsu, but its effect depended on the user. Obito could control the fourth Mizukage with a glance, but that didn't guarantee Shinji the same control. Still, he'd already implanted a psychological suggestion in Shion. If he didn't do anything overtly shocking, like revealing the Mangekyo or showing Susanoo, a casual meeting wouldn't trigger her to remember everything. He helped her to her feet. "You're not from our village, are you?" Shion straightened instantly. "You should call me Your Highness." "Your Highness?" "Yes." She smoothed her ceremonial robes. "I am Shion-sama, priestess of the Land of Demons." A rumble came from her stomach. Shinji's expression shifted. "Hungry?" "Ah, a little." "Come on, I'll treat you to Baba-Q." She followed him eagerly. "Why are you buying me Ba-Q?" "Do I need a reason?" he said, shrugging. "Oh," Shion's eyes lit up like a child's. "You're not just trying to be friends with me, are you? Well, if you're so sincere, I'll accept." Shinji couldn't help a small, inward sigh at how starved for companionship she seemed. He felt a twinge of guilt about asking her to act as his alibi, but the plan had to work. He hurried her along. "By the way, what's your name?" She trotted behind him like a shadow. Soon they reached a lively part of town. Fireworks popped and bloomed above the rooftops, and villagers cheered. Turns out the root operative's deaths and the Anbu building incident hadn't canceled the festival. Following his memory, Shinji led Shion to the barbecue joint Haku had once mentioned. His class was having a get-together there tonight to watch the fireworks. He had been invited, but declined earlier. If he could spend the evening there with Shion and then briefly show himself to his classmates, they'd all become witnesses that he'd been eating barbecue and watching fireworks at the restaurant all night. They took a private room next to the main dining space rather than joining the group. The staff brought a sizzling grill and plates of fresh meat. Under the fireworks spilling color outside the window, the two of them attacked the food like they hadn't eaten in days. When the plates were nearly empty, Shinji began figuring out how to make his presence known to his classmates next door. Shion, stuffed and cheerful, pushed the private room door open and shouted down to the owner, "I made a friend! Tonight, the whole restaurant is on me!" Cheers rose from the dining rooms. She spun around proudly and looked at the stunned Shinji. At that moment, the door to the next room opened, and Tenten's voice cut through, sharp and amused. "My classmate doesn't need you to pay." Chapter 14, Aster's Fiasco. When Tenten pushed open the private room door, all the classmates next door glanced over and saw Shion with a bewildered Shinji. "Well, I guess the mission's accomplished," someone muttered. Shinji rubbed his forehead. Just then a voice called from the other private room, "Shinji, you're here too." He looked and saw Haku inside that room, but in different clothes, no longer in the stealth gear from earlier. He scanned the crowd and spotted Karen as well, now in a new outfit, squeezed into the far corner and avoiding his gaze. Great. It was obvious. Haku and Karen had the same idea he had. They were using the class reunion as an alibi, blending into the crowd to cover their activities tonight. Tenten spotted Shinji and beamed. "Shinji, come join us. My treat tonight." Shion bristled. "Hey, we agreed it was my treat." Tenten sniffed. "Sorry, I already paid for this restaurant tonight." Amid their bickering, Shinji and Shion entered the private room. Shinji took a seat and looked around. Hyuga Neji, usually distant and severe, was unexpectedly there, methodically picking up pieces of grilled meat with his chopsticks, eating with an almost solemn concentration. Lee was equally earnest, his mouth shiny with oil. Those two were definitely here for a free meal. Lee caught Shinji's stare and blurted, "Shinji, the grilled meat here is amazing. Try some." Neji only gave him a cool glance and went back to his food. Shinji muttered to himself, "Where's the noble clan dignity?" Haku leaned in quietly. "If I'd known you were coming out, Shinji, I should have invited you when I left." "It's fine," Shinji said, shaking his head. He already knew Haku hailed from the Hidden Mist. If Haku wasn't serving a high-ranking Mist official, then he was likely a Mist spy. Given Haku's secret meeting earlier tonight, right when Hidden Mist people arrived in the village, Shinji suspected a link. But he couldn't reconcile how the Mist, supposedly under Obito's covert control, had managed to place Haku in Konoha. Whatever the chain of command, Shinji felt the target was clear. Haku's interest was probably him, specifically him as an Uchiha. He glanced at Karin in the corner. She'd claimed that she and her mother had drifted to the grass village, so her sneaking around tonight was probably tied to grass. Why the grass village would send her to Konoha was unclear, but Karen's unusual physiology made her more useful than an ordinary medical ninja. They're both double agents, he thought. Despite knowing how problematic Haku and Karin were, Shinji didn't plan to expose them. As a remnant Uchiha, he felt no special loyalty to Konoha. He had no desire to tear anything down, nor to protect everything. Both Haku and Karen had helped him before, so he had no moral high ground to go after them. Besides, they might represent channels to the Hidden Mist and Grass Village. Keeping them as options could be useful. His thoughts drifted back to the earlier break-in at the Anbu building. The dog-masked Anbu's reaction had been triggered by something he said. Then the Anbu attacked brazenly. He replayed the partial sentence the Anbu had blurted. "The Sharingan has already been taken by Lord Danzo." That unfinished line clicked into place. The reason he'd been exposed wasn't a slip of luck. It was that the Sharingan had already been removed from the Anbu and taken by Danzo. Shinji frowned. After the Uchiha's annihilation, the third Hokage had disbanded Root. He hadn't expected Danzo to still have the authority to seize all the Sharingan from the Anbu. The third had favored Danzo too much. Still, there was a gain. He now had confirmation of who possessed the Sharingan. Shion and Tenten resumed their argument over the bill. Shion planted her hands on her hips, sounding like a stern grown-up. "Let me pay. This isn't a small amount. Why are you arguing with me?" Tenten pouted. "I already said I'd treat, so I have to keep my word. My family business is small, but I can afford it." Their classmates snickered when Tenten called her family business small. Shinji tried to mediate. "You two." Haku pulled him back. "Don't worry about them. Let's focus on the meat." No one else was interested in mediating. Everyone else was zealously focused on the barbecue. Even Neji was engrossed. Training taijutsu burned a lot of energy. Shinji understood why. Shion, after all, was the shrine maiden of the land of demons, holding a status equal to a daimyo. She had no concept of handling money herself. Tenten's family ran nearly a third of the Land of Fire's ninja tool business, and Tenten had treated tools like toys since childhood. Let the two wealthy girls fight it out. Shinji joined the others at the table. After all the chaos of the night, he was hungry. Eating together felt more satisfying than the hurried meal from earlier. While he chewed, his eyes kept flicking to Haku and Karin. The forces behind them would almost certainly make waves again during the Chunin exams. If he played his cards right, in that chaos, he might be able to reach for Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan, the one Danzo had taken. The rich girl showdown ended predictably. Shion was trounced. She never carried money. Her guards always paid for her. So when it came down to actually paying the bill, she was completely lost. Leaving the barbecue place, Tenten laughed and teased Shion. "This place was great. I'll treat you again next time." Lee, patting his stomach and burping, leaned forward eagerly. "When?" The others perked up. Even Shinji felt the advantage of having wealthy classmates. After midnight, it would be a new week, and the rankings would update. "I sincerely ask for everyone's support with recommendation votes and monthly passes. New books aren't easy. Classmates, please help." Chapter 15. Cat Country, Early Morning. Uchiha Sasuke dragged his exhausted body out of the Anbu building. He had been inexplicably arrested the night before and interrogated for hours. The charge, trespassing into the Anbu headquarters. Anger flared through him as he remembered the accusation. He had never even known where the Anbu building was before last night. These incompetent village officials. First they let that scoundrel Itachi escape, and now they were framing him. It was maddening. Inside the Anbu headquarters, two operatives stood by a window watching Sasuke walk away. The one with the eagle mask hesitated. "Are we really gonna let him go?" The operative in the dog mask answered calmly. He was probably set up. They had run the usual checks overnight, inspected for injuries, searched alibis, screened all possible suspects. Sasuke had been carrying the intruder's mask when he was taken in, but that wasn't enough to prove guilt beyond doubt. Who would do this? Hard to say. The dog-masked Anbu paused, then continued. The root operative who detonated himself with explosive tags outside the Sunagakure outpost last night was reportedly sent by Lord Danzo. He was supposed to be monitoring Uchiha Shinji. The eagle-masked Anbu stiffened, then understood. Someone's targeting the remaining Uchiha. That's the conclusion from above, the dog-masked Anbu said. Last night, an Uchiha Sasuke was framed, and the root operative shadowing Shinji was killed. They didn't even bother to hide their purpose. They wanted to see whether Konoha trusts the surviving Uchiha. He didn't say all of it out loud, but he suspected the other side's real aim was to pry open the truth behind the Uchiha massacre. The Uchiha had been one of Konoha's premier clans. Exposing whatever lay under that tragedy would be explosive. The eagle-masked Anbu, quick to catch on, bristled. "This is outrageous. What do they take our village for?" The dog-masked operative sighed. The village had not yet recovered from the Nine Tails incident, and now it had lost dozens of powerful ocular bloodline ninjas in the Uchiha. Konoha still looked like a leader among the 5 great shinobi nations on the surface, but only those inside knew how vulnerable it had become. That vulnerability explained why the higher-ups refused to cancel the fireworks festival despite the night's incidents. At times like these, projecting control was even more important than the truth. At the Ninja Academy, Iruka blinked in surprise. What? You want to leave the village? Shinji nodded. Yes, I want to use the academy holiday to go to Cat Country and contract a ninja cat. Cat Country? Iruka considered it. Cat Country wasn't far and frequently handled missions with Konoha. The two were friendly and cooperative. Given the special ties between the Uchiha and Cat Country, sending someone there made sense. All right, how about I go with you day after tomorrow? Shinji appreciated Iruka's offer, but shook his head. Iruka-sensei, I can manage by myself. After Shinji insisted, Iruka reluctantly agreed and issued a temporary village pass. With the pass in hand, Shinji hurried back to his apartment, packed, and set off. Though his interrogations had cleared up many points, the root operative who had been monitoring him had been killed under suspicious circumstances. There was no telling whether Danzo would use that death as an excuse to start trouble. Shinji's departure had two purposes: to take the next step toward acquiring Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan, and to test Danzo, see whether the elder would make a move. If he stayed in the village and Danzo acted, he would either have to surrender his freedom or fight cornered. Outside the village, however, it was less likely Danzo would send Jonin-level assassins after an 8-year-old academy student. At worst, Shinji could deal with any pursuers and then defect if necessary. With that in mind, he moved quickly and reached the village gate in no time. He took a deep breath and approached the checkpoint. If Danzo wanted to make a move, the gate would be the obvious place. But when he showed the temporary pass, the guard only asked a few routine questions and waved him through. That was that easy? Shinji muttered once he was outside the gates. He had expected more resistance. A pass from Iruka had solved everything. Could Danzo be planning to act only when Shinji was out of the village? He stayed alert. He couldn't overestimate Danzo's decency. There was no honor in that elder if he could avoid it. Shinji unfolded a map to confirm the route to Cat Country, then pocketed it, drew a long breath, and centered himself. Total concentration. The journey was long, perfect for training his breathing method. Developing his body through that technique would let him fine-tune every ounce of his power. In the Demon Slayer world, the human body's limits meant the breathing method could only do so much. Pushing it to the extreme sometimes required marks that came at terrible costs. The ninja world was different. With chakra, ninjutsu, secret techniques, and bloodline limits, a shinobi's body could surpass ordinary human limits. For a chakra user, the upper limit of the breathing method was far higher than any swordsman's. With a muffled rush, Shinji's body shot forward like an arrow. A trip that would normally take 3 or 4 days, he completed in half a day by traveling at full speed with the breathing method engaged. As he walked through Cat Country's streets, every ninja cat along the way halted and watched him, eyes fixed on the Uchiha fan crest on the back of his clothes. The Uchiha had always been close to Cat Country. From contracting ninja cats and customizing tools to sharing intelligence, their cooperation was deep. Seeing an Uchiha in Cat Country would normally be unremarkable. But Shinji's arrival was different. He was the first Uchiha to set foot in Cat Country since the clan's extermination. The looks he received were not just curiosity. They were the weight of a clan's name, arriving in a place that had been forced to reckon with its absence. Chapter 16. Briquettes. As the ninja cats clustered around Shinji, he took the chance to scan the crowd. Cat Country had grown up inside an abandoned city, so much of the original street grid and storefronts remained. He hadn't known what to expect. No one from his clan had ever brought him here. And what he found was nothing like the quiet ruin he'd imagined. Neon signs blinked above crowded thoroughfares, vendors shouted their wares, and all manner of shops lined the streets. There was even a hair salon, its window plastered with a poster of an elegant white cat and an advertisement for a coupon giveaway. For a moment, Shinji had no words for the jumble of surprise and amusement that welled up in him. After wandering a while, he found a tabby cat who specialized in selling information. Meow. The tabby lay on a wooden stump, lazily pawing the air. Shinji hesitated, then approached. "The price for information is money," the tabby said, stretching out a fat paw toward him. Shinji fished out 500 yen and placed it on the paw. The tabby took the cash, sniffed, and then pointed a paw back at him. "Not enough," Shinji blinked. You, 500 isn't enough for a little information? Information is 1,000 per query, the tabby replied smugly. Even if your clan head came, never mind. What do you want to know? Shinji gave up on arguing. I'm looking for a ninja cat who's good at stealth and knows a little medical ninjutsu. That's high demand. The tabby shook off its laziness and began to talk, animated and gossipy. Stealth was practically a racial specialty among ninja cats, so there were many who could move unseen. But the ones who also had even basic medical ninjutsu were rare. Dokuganryu, Mitsuba, Yomotsumaru. After collecting his fee and directions, Shinji walked through cat country, weighing the three names. Dokuganryu had the biggest reputation. He'd been under contract to a jonin from the Uchiha clan until recently and was now free. Mitsuba was solid but unremarkable. Yomotsumaru, on the other hand, was barely known, rumored to be an underage kitten with no combat record and no summoning contract. Since Shinji's task was dirty work, breaking into Danzo's root base to recover Uchiha Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan, a big name might be a liability. He decided to see Yomotsumaru first. Following the tabby's directions, he threaded through narrow alleys and found a battered little house at Sakaguramachi 33. Faint noises came from inside. He knocked. The door opened a crack and a small black cat poked out, sizing him up. Uchiha? Shinji nodded. Are you Yomotsumaru? The black kitten puffed up, trying to sound important. That's right, I am Yo, child of the night, spirit of the moonlight, Mo, master of shadows, Sumaru. Despite the small body and high, childish voice, the pretense of gravitas was almost comical. Shinji's lip curled. Just tell me what you can do. Yomotsumaru brightened. Good question. I'm proficient in more than 10 ninjutsu, and I also… And, without answering, he formed hand signs with both paws. A gust of air, a flicker, and Yomotsumaru folded into the shadow beneath him. Only a faint, dark silhouette remained on the ground. Shinji stared. This is… Yomotsumaru reappeared a moment later, looking very pleased with himself. Ho ho, not just any trick. Shinji's eyes lit up. You're the one. I want to sign a summoning contract with you. Not so fast. Yomotsumaru held up a paw, then swept his chest out with mock arrogance. I, the great Yo child of the night, spirit of the moonlight, Mo, master of shadows, Sumaru of cat country, am destined for fame in the ninja world. Not just anyone can bind me. Shinji frowned. What are your conditions? Yomotsumaru walked around him, inspecting him like a critic. Have you awakened your Sharingan? What's your position in the Konoha military police? Are you a chunin? Do you have an allowance? The questions made Shinji feel like he'd wandered into an interview. He answered, I'm still at the Ninja Academy. A little sniff escaped Yomotsumaru. An academy kid, huh? How much money could you possibly have? At that moment, an orange cat appeared with a box of sake and dropped it at Yomotsumaru's feet. Coalball, this is the sake your dad ordered yesterday. When are you going to pay up? Yomotsumaru, who'd been all puffed up moments earlier, immediately froze. He ordered another box? The orange cat sighed. Coalball, don't look at me like that. You can't put this off forever. I'll give you 3 days. Hanami asked me to remind your mom about the perm money, too. He shook his head and left. Yomotsumaru's expression turned sheepish. He looked at Shinji and tried to recover his dignity. I don't know that cat. I really don't. Shinji nodded. I understand, Coalball. No, my name is Yomotsumaru, the kitten protested. All right, Coalball, Shinji said solemnly. Coalball buried his face in his paws, defeated. Peeking through the doorway, Shinji saw why the kitten had looked so worried. The house was full. An obese white female cat with perm rollers was playing cards with several other females. A black Tom was slumped on the sofa with empty sake bottles around him. In the corner, several black and white kittens chased a ball of yarn. Shinji let out a quiet, rueful breath. Supporting a family? Coalball gave a helpless nod. Life's not easy. Shinji needed confirmation. You know medical ninjutsu? Coalball didn't lie. Basic healing isn't a problem. And that trick just now? Transparent escape. He blinked. I'm not yet proficient. I can only use it at night or in places with real shadows. A spark of excitement flared in Shinji. A stealth technique tied to shadows. This was a natural racial ability, and it fit his needs perfectly. Despite being underage and a little rough around the edges, Coalball matched the requirements. I'm satisfied with your skills, Shinji said. I think you'll be satisfied with mine. Coalball tilted his head. What can you do? Shinji leisurely took out his bankbook. A moment later, Shinji left the alley feeling satisfied. To contract Coalball, he'd paid a one-time fee of 500,000 and agreed to a summoning salary of 5,000 each time. He'd also laid down strict terms. Coalball could not reveal anything about him to anyone, not even other ninja cats. And so long as Shinji lived, Coalball could not sign with any other ninja. He belonged to Shinji alone. With Coalball settled, Shinji didn't leave Cat Country immediately. He visited Dokuganryu and Sanhua again, then tracked down the tabby who sold information. This time he held 1,000 coins in his hand. I've seen all the ones you mentioned, and none are good enough. If you want this money, point me to someone truly powerful. The tabby stared at the coins. What? You're not even impressed by Dokuganryu? That one fought in the Third Shinobi World War, faced Jonin from Iwagakure. Too ugly, Shinji replied. The tabby blinked then, almost reluctantly. Another name came to mind. Princess Fuki. Princess? Specializes in wind release. The tabby gave him a look that implied he should understand. Shinji froze for a moment and then got it. Uchiha tended to specialize in fire release and tools. Wind release pairs well with fire. With good synergy, compound ninjutsu could become devastating. For an Uchiha, a wind release ninja cat could be extremely valuable. The tabby snatched the coins back, pulled a page from its bag, and tossed it at him. Shinji picked up a poster, an elegant white cat, regal and familiar. The face triggered a memory. She'd been the model in a street hair salon ad he'd seen earlier. Is she really Cat Country's princess? He asked aloud, but when he looked up, the tabby had already slunk away. Following the address on the poster, he found Princess Fuki on set, shooting a promotional ad. Seeing him with her poster, she arched an elegant shoulder. Another autograph seeker? How troublesome to be pursued by admirers, she drawled, and pressed her paw into an ink pad to leave a faint print on the poster. I'm not here for an autograph, Shinji said. If you intended to take a photo, dismiss the thought, Fuki replied coolly. Shinji cut to the chase. Are you really Cat Country's princess? She answered with pride. Is there any other ninja cat in Cat Country as perfect as I am? He guessed her status would make contracting difficult, but having a well-known ninja cat on his roster would also hide Coalball. So he set down a contract proposal. I want to sign with you. Name your price. Make any demands. Fuki, who had been turning away, stopped and approached with feline grace. She accepted the contract. As Shinji sealed the deal, he muttered under his breath, half pleased, half amused, so I'm the last ninja cat-style Uchiha in the ninja world. Itachi had his ninja crows, representing crow-style Uchiha. Sasuke would use snakes or eagles someday. Shinji, then, was the last to take the cat path. He didn't linger in Cat Country or visit Cat Grandma. After restocking ninja tools and exploding tags, he returned to Konoha at full speed. This trip had been about contracting a ninja cat and testing whether Danzo would make a move, not defection, so the sooner he was back inside the village, the safer he'd be. By evening, he finally saw Konoha's walls. Huffing and bent over with his hands on his knees, he realized his beginner breathing method, boosted now that his body was stronger, gave him far greater stamina than the swordsman he'd glimpsed in his memory fragments had managed at the same stage. The stronger the body, the higher the breathing method's ceiling. At the gate, the guards were surprised to see him return so quickly. A boy of 8 with a temporary pass would usually take longer to come back. After his permit was verified, he headed straight for his apartment, puzzling over the night's strange events. The person sent to watch him had died so suddenly, and Danzo hadn't reacted. Not like him. Maybe something else had happened last night that pulled the elder's attention away. Inside the compound, he ran into Iruka accompanied by 2 Anbu escorting Haku down the stairs. Shinji's face hardened. Haku was arrested? Iruka brightened at the sight of Shinji. Shinji, I thought you'd left the village. I just got back. What's going on here? Shinji asked. Iruka didn't answer directly. He nodded to the Anbu, then patted Haku's shoulder. Don't worry, it's nothing. Haku's voice was calm. I know. The 2 Anbu led Haku away. Shinji turned back to Iruka. Why was Haku taken by Anbu? Iruka hesitated, then said, Today the village received a protest from the Hidden Mist. They want us to hand over Haku. Shinji frowned. Iruka went on, seeing the question in his look. Haku's family isn't from Konoha. He's from the Yuki clan, a bloodline limit family of the Hidden Mist. For reasons you probably know, the Yuki were wiped out in the mist. We took Haku in as an orphan. Shinji's expression darkened. So the Hidden Mist is demanding Haku be returned. Iruka shook his head. Don't worry. The village won't hand Haku over. The Ambu were ordered by the Hokage to escort him to a safe house. Chapter 18. In vain. I understand. Shinji took out his key to open the door. Before stepping inside, he turned to Iruka. Thanks for helping me get the pass this morning. Iruka blinked. You're welcome. Shinji nodded, went into the room, and closed the door. He lay on the bed and let out a small sigh of relief. The fact that White hadn't been captured meant last night's events hadn't been exposed yet. Hidden Mist was putting pressure on the village for someone. He smiled to himself. He'd been uncertain about White's origins, but with the Mist Village making such a move, it was obvious. White had to be a spy planted by Hidden Mist in Konoha. On the surface, their actions looked like pressure, but covertly they were protecting White. The reasoning was simple. First, White's Yuki clan had been wiped out by Hidden Mist. As a surviving remnant, anyone would assume he hated the Mist. Second, there was the old grudge over the Three Tails incident. Hidden Mist had tried to unleash it on Konoha, and Kakashi had been the one to kill Rin Nohara after she became the Jinchuriki. Konoha and the Mist had reasons to needle each other, so Konoha's leadership wouldn't pass up an opportunity to spite Hidden Mist. Finally, White might be the last shinobi in the current world to hold the Ice Release bloodline limit. If Konoha took him in, Ice Release could become a Konoha bloodline in decades. Motive, benefit, and the appearance of deniability all made Konoha's willingness to accept White reasonable. After all, it seemed unlikely the Mist would slaughter an entire bloodline simply to plant a spy. That line of thought made Shinji shake his head. The village could be making a mistake. White possessed Ice Release, but he'd been wandering well before the Yuki annihilation. He wasn't necessarily a direct descendant of the clan. And with White's personality, it was unclear how much he actually cared about clan vendettas. In the original timeline, the reason he followed Zabuza and later sacrificed himself had nothing to do with revenge against Hidden Mist. Shinji muttered, if the village actually hands White over, that'll be rich. If the Mist pushed hard enough and threatened war, the outwardly tough but inwardly cautious village might well surrender him. It had happened before, and that raised another question. Had Hidden Mist ordered White to deliberately get close to him? He didn't know what objective Hidden Mist might have with that plan. Still, the Mist's public posturing made it less likely the village would investigate White right away, and that in turn made Shinji safer. A new alert sounded in his head. Plane under invasion. Countdown. He sat bolt upright. For now, he pushed White to the back of his mind and focused on himself. If he could get Uchiha Fugaku's Manjikyu before this invasion, not only would he be much safer, but he might be able to raise his rank and demand better rewards. You want me to save the shinobi world? Sorry, I'm here to profit, he thought wryly. He spread a map of the village on the bed. Excluding the central districts, residential areas, the Hokage building, hospital, and academy, this is the Hyuga compound. This is the Nara family's deer park. This is the Inusuka kennels. This is the Aburame insect enclosure. He methodically marked off areas with a pen. He didn't know exactly where Danzo's lair was, so he had to deduce it. Konoha wasn't huge, but once you eliminated the obvious core, commercial districts, housing blocks, clan grounds, and properties, few places remained. He crossed off marginal zone till his gaze settled on a single area. Is Root's base here? It seemed unlikely. The spot sat uncomfortably close to the Uchiha compound. If Danzo had placed his lair there, it would mean he intended to intervene regardless of whether the Uchiha had rebellious intentions. Shinji's memory fragments from the original owner surfaced. That area had been avoided, like a forbidden zone. He circled a few other suspicious spots on the map too. Each could be a Root hideout. When he finished, he folded the map and walked to the window. Night had fallen, streetlights were on, and in the distance the Ninja Academy glowed. The teachers were making the last preparations for tomorrow's Chunin exams. He let out another breath. I'll wait for a disruption during the exams. That'll be my chance. He wouldn't act blindly this time. He needed an opportunity he could exploit. Across the village, Sasuke, who had been interrogated all night, slept most of the day before finally going out for something to eat. He ended up wandering without direction to a little river, muttering, "Why does the whole world turn against me?" He still fumed over the previous night. On the opposite bank, a familiar figure caught his eye, Uzumaki Naruto, the academy kid they all whispered about as the fox demon's child. Sasuke had never paid him much mind before. Naruto looked equally restless. It was already night, and they both should have been home, yet here they were, aimless on the riverbanks. They stared at one another for a moment. Then Naruto strolled down to the water, picked up a flat stone, and began skipping it across toward Sasuke. Splash, splash, splash. The stone traced graceful arcs through the air, struck the surface, and hopped toward Sasuke. He caught it with his right hand. From the other bank, Naruto smiled and waved. Sasuke muttered, "That guy's disliked by everyone. How can he still smile like that?" He didn't know, but he felt something in him soften. His gloom lifted a little. Just as Sasuke was about to send the stone skimming back across, a sudden explosion went off in the small forest nearby. Sasuke turned, frowning. Fireworks? He didn't notice that two Ambu agents assigned to shadow him and Naruto had already flashed toward the trees where the blast had originated. Chapter 19. Chance. Third change. In the small forest, swish swish, two Ambu charged toward the source of the explosion. At the center of the blast, Karin sat in a cloud of dust, staring blankly, her eyes unfocused. Beside her lay a Konoha ninja, bloodied and badly wounded. The Ambu scanned the area cautiously, then approached Karin and asked, "What happened?" Karin pointed. "Someone attacked me out of nowhere. Mizuki-sensei was nearby. That person hurt Mizuki-sensei and ran off in that direction." The two Ambu exchanged a grave look. Karin was registered with the Ambu. Everyone knew this red-haired girl was a survivor of the Uzumaki clan. Someone trying to abduct an Uzumaki survivor inside the village? How brazen. They reached a quick, tacit decision. One would return immediately to Naruto and Sasuke to prevent an ambush, while the other would send word and give pursuit in the direction Karin had indicated. Swish, swish. They vanished. By the small river, Sasuke withdrew his gaze and turned a pebble over in his hand. Naruto stood on the opposite bank, eager, waiting for him to skip it. Seeing Naruto's bright eyes and wide smile, Sasuke allowed the faintest smile, the first since the Uchiha Massacre, and flicked the pebble across the water. Clink, clink, clink as it bounced in arcs and flew straight toward Naruto. Naruto reached out, ready to catch it. Splash. At the same instant, a gale blew countless exploding tags across the water, hurtling toward Naruto from all directions. The Ambu who had rushed back from the forest saw it and were instantly alarmed. In his apartment, Shinji had already washed up early. A round trip to Cat Country in one day had worn him out. He planned to sleep early. After checking his ninja tool pouch and stashing the tools and exploding tags he'd restocked in Cat Country, he lay down on the bed. What a day! He was just closing his eyes when, boom, 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 huge explosions rolled in the distance. The bed trembled under him. He went to the window. The night sky was lit red by towering flames, as if the heavens themselves were aflame. Shinji knew the village wouldn't be completely calm during the Chunin exams, but he hadn't expected this. Alert now, he checked his pouch, changed clothes, put on his mask, moving with the smooth efficiency of a trained shinobi. He opened the door quietly and slipped out. Using trees and shadows as cover, he headed toward the area he'd circled on his map earlier, most likely Danzo's root base. He sank into a patch of grass and watched. Suddenly, two figures streaked past toward the exploded area, so fast and so stealthy that, without his Manjikyo Sharingan, he might not have noticed them at all. There shouldn't be Ambu stationed here, Shinji muttered, a smile flickering across his face. With the village short-staffed, there was no reason to keep personnel in a place with no strategic facilities. Those two were clearly elite, far too skilled to be ordinary Ambu. That made them likely root operatives, and if so, Danzo's base had to be nearby. He tempered his excitement. Danzo wouldn't have many subordinates, only highly trusted, elite men. Breaking into a root base would be far more dangerous than sneaking into the Anbu building. Root didn't answer to the village's regular security protocols. The two Root shinobi were probably just investigating the incident. Shinji moved like a hunter through the grass, patient and precise, searching for an entrance. Then his pupils constricted. He saw Danzo in the distance, emerging from a very old building with 4 subordinates, all hurrying toward the explosion. There it is. So that was the entrance. If even Danzo had rushed out, whatever had happened must be serious. Shinji pushed that thought away. His own mission mattered more. In a village this large, crises would be handled. He, an Uchiha remnant, didn't need to waste time worrying. He bit his finger, formed the seals. Summoning technique. A puff of white smoke, and Coal Ball poked out, looking around before padding over. "Shinji, why summon me this late at night?" it asked quietly. Shinji explained his plan. Coal Ball's eyes widened. "Isn't that too risky?" It hadn't expected its summoner to be so bold. Shinji was still an academy student, not yet a genin. Coal Ball hesitated. Shinji shook his head. "Now is the best opportunity. If we miss it, we may never get another." "Are you scared?" Shinji teased when he saw Coal Ball's legs trembling. Coal Ball tried to puff up bravado. "Heh, I am you, Night's Darling, Moonlight Spirit, Ghost of the Alley, Shadow Master, Maru of Cat Country. Do you think I'd be afraid of a little scene like this?" "Then why are your legs shaking?" Shinji asked dryly. "I'm excited," Coal Ball replied, a hint of truth in its voice. Shinji glanced toward the root entrance and said, "Don't worry, I'll avoid fighting if I can. If things go wrong, I'll create a distraction so you can get what we came for." "All right," Coal Ball nodded, then formed hand signs. Using transparent escape, it melted into Shinji's shadow and hid there, ready. They disappeared into the night toward Danzo's lair. Chapter 20. The Roar of Beasts Over the Village. Shinji wasn't in a hurry. He waited a little longer until he was sure Danzo had left, then used the transformation technique to increase his height, slipped into Ambu attire, and rushed for the root base. The base lay underground. It had no other doors or windows, only a single hidden entrance beneath a dilapidated building. That lone entry was guarded around the clock by Root Ninja. Shinji had expected that. He'd already activated his Mangekyo Sharingan before launching his surprise approach. When the root guard at the entrance called out to verify his identity, Shinji struck immediately with Genjutsu, seizing control. "Take me to Danzo's secret vault," he ordered. At first, the guard fought the illusion. Shinji had never specialized in Genjutsu, nor had anyone taught him its finer techniques, but the brute power of his Mangekyo Sharingan had worked for him before. He hadn't expected resistance here. Realizing the man had been trained to resist Genjutsu, Shinji tightened his focus and forced his dojutsu harder. "Take me to the secret vault." Under the weight of his doubled ocular power, the Root Ninja finally succumbed and moved like a puppet, leading Shinji, disguised in Ambu gear, into the base. The interior was far larger than Shinji had imagined. After descending a long spiral staircase, he stopped dead. Before him yawned a gigantic, bottomless pit like a skyscraper turned underground. Rings of rooms were carved into the rock at each level, linked by winding stairs and swaying rope bridges. Even from a distance, it felt oppressive and terrifying. "Continue," Shinji urged, and the controlled guard obeyed. As they went deeper, Shinji discreetly set exploding tags at key points along the route. The light grew scarce. The lower ropeways looked like descent into a void. He kept his unease in check and watched every shadow. After threading through complex stairs and rope bridges, the Root Ninja led Shinji to a large door. "Is this Danzo's secret vault?" Shinji asked. The guard nodded. Shinji backed away to a safe distance. "Open it," he commanded. The man pushed the heavy door aside and a faint light spilled out, illuminating rows of display shelves. Even with his Mangekyo Sharingan, the distance and dimness kept Shinji from identifying the items on those shelves. He paused. "Are there any traps inside?" "I don't know," the guard admitted. "Then you go in first." The guard stepped into the vault without hesitation. The moment he did, the floor erupted in a sizzling crackle. A blinding electrical surge engulfed him. He screamed. Immediately, warning lights set into the rock walls throughout the base flashed red, and a shrill alarm began to wail. Shinji's heart leapt. The electrocuted guard, smoking and barely able to stand, managed to hurl a kunai at Shinji. Shinji dodged and ran. He burst out of the passage and onto the spiral stairwell. Behind him, dark figures were already converging from all directions. The injured guard stumbled out after him. Relief and a new plan flashed across Shinji's face. As he sped up the stairs, he pulled several kunai from his pouch, each tied with exploding tags, and flung them back toward the trap locations he'd placed during the descent. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions rolled through the root base like thunder. Is he insane? Damn it, stop him! The downward architecture that made the base secure also made it vulnerable to internal destruction. Repeated blasts could trigger a catastrophic collapse, burying everyone in the pit. When several root ninja saw Shinji attacking the rock with explosives, some abandoned the pursuit and began sealing the walls with earth release techniques, aiming to reinforce the structure. Shinji felt a spike of fear, but with Susanoo at his side, he reckoned he could break out even if the base crumbled. He became bolder, pulling out the rest of the exploding tags from his pouch. "Stop!" the root ninja shouted. If Shinji detonated that many tags at once, the base might not withstand it, and everyone could die. The pursuers halted, afraid that further provocation would mean mutual destruction. Shinji stopped, too. He ceased detonating the tags, instead fully activating his breathing method and racing up the spiral stairwell. Under the furious, gritted teeth stares of the root ninja, he dashed for the surface entrance. As he burst out into daylight, he stuck exploding tags along the entrance's flanks and detonated them. The blasts instantly swallowed the entrance in fire and rock, collapsing the surface structure. Shinji didn't wait to watch. He vanished into the surrounding bushes, and only after he reached a safe distance did he release his transformation technique and remove his mask. "I can only rely on Coal Ball now," he muttered, staring toward the ruined entrance. Earlier, when he had turned to flee, Coal Ball, who had been shadowing him, had slipped away and concealed himself in the shadows outside the secret vault. That was why Shinji had abandoned the chance to search the vault himself. He needed Coal Ball to get in. Opportunities like this, Danzo away, the base relatively empty, would be hard to come by again. If he failed now, the base would be on high alert and infiltration would become nearly impossible. A sudden roar cut through his thoughts. A sound like the earth itself had been wrenched open, followed by another, more terrible cry that rolled over the village. Shinji spun toward the source and went completely still. The Nine Tails.